Sometimes I look back at the photos, the ones from our early days, and I almost don't recognize the girl in them. She was so bright, so full of hope, so utterly blind. I remember thinking I had everything figured out. I had the man, the career, the whole happily ever after script written out, ready to be lived. If only I knew then what I know now, maybe I wouldn't have been so eager to turn the page. My husband, Mark. God, it still feels strange calling him that. We were together for 10 years, married for 7. And for almost all of that time, I believed we had a perfect, rock-solid partnership. He was the calm to my storm, the quiet strength that balanced out my more impulsive nature. He was an architect, a good one, with this steady, reliable energy. We met in a coffee shop downtown. I spilled a triple-shot latte all over his blueprints. A disaster, really. And instead of getting angry, he just laughed. That laugh, deep and genuine, hooked me immediately. It felt like the safest sound in the world. Our relationship was built on what I thought was absolute honesty. We shared passwords, bank accounts, even the most embarrassing childhood stories. We had a pact. No secrets ever. We swore to each other that if things ever got tough, we'd talk, not hide. Naive, right? The kind of vow only people who haven't truly been tested make. The first few years were idyllic. We bought a small house with a huge backyard for a dog we never got. We traveled, hiked, and basically spent every moment together, working toward our shared future. We were busy people, both of us with demanding careers. I'm a marketing manager, which meant late nights and travel, but Mark was always supportive. He'd bring me coffee, ask about my day, and listen patiently to my rants about demanding clients. He was the anchor. The shift, when I look back, was so subtle it could easily be dismissed as stress or just the natural settling in of a long marriage. It started about 2 years ago. Mark's job got complicated. He began taking on projects in a city 2 hours away. At first, it was just a few days a month. "Big project, big client, gotta put in the FaceTime, babe," he'd say, kissing me goodbye at 5 a.m. I was proud of him. I encouraged him. Then the trips became more frequent. 3 days a week turned into 4. He started renting a small apartment near the site, citing the exhausting commute. "Saves me 4 hours a day, hun. Think of the productivity." His logic was impeccable, his explanations always reasonable. He'd call me every night, exactly at 8 p.m. We'd have our usual 20-minute chat. How was my day? What did I eat? What time was I going to bed? It was routine, predictable, and in hindsight, dangerously structured. It was almost too perfect. The first real crack appeared about a year into his distant work schedule. It was my birthday. A big one, the kind you plan months in advance. We'd booked a weekend getaway to the coast. Mark was supposed to finish his work on Friday morning and drive straight down. Friday came, and no Mark. I called him at 10 a.m. He sounded rushed. "Babe, a crisis. Huge plumbing issue at the site. Pipes burst. I have to stay. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. I promise." I was devastated, but I understood. Construction is messy. I spent my birthday alone ordering takeout and trying not to cry into my wine glass. That night, I decided to be the supportive wife. I'd drive up to his rental and surprise him, maybe bring him a cake and cheer him up after a rough day. I knew the address, or so I thought. He'd given me the details for emergencies. I drove the 2 hours, my stomach a knot of nervousness and excitement. I found the building he'd described, a new, modern apartment complex. I punched in the code he'd given me, and the door clicked open. I walked up to his supposed apartment number 407. I was about to knock when I heard voices inside. Not Mark's voice on the phone. Actual voices. Plural. I pressed my ear against the door, feeling ridiculous, like a character in a bad B movie. I heard Mark's distinctive, deep laugh, the same laugh that had charmed me in the coffee shop. But then I heard another sound, a sound that froze the blood in my veins. A woman's gentle, melodic voice saying, clear as a bell, "Happy birthday, Daddy." The air left my lungs. Daddy. Mark was supposed to be dealing with burst pipes. He was supposed to be tired, stressed, alone. The word daddy wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a casual slip-up. It was a knife twist. We didn't have kids. We couldn't have kids, something we'd both grieved over years ago. It was a settled fact of our marriage. I didn't knock. I didn't burst in screaming. My body went into a strange, cold shock. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought the sound would carry down the hall. I raced back to my car, got onto the highway, and drove home in a blur of tears and disbelief. When Mark finally called me that night around 10 p.m., he sounded genuinely exhausted. "The pipes were a nightmare, honey. I'm just crashing now. I miss you. Happy birthday again." I managed to choke out, "I missed you too. Everything all right?" "Perfectly fine now. Just tired. See you Saturday morning, I promise." He lied. He lied with such conviction, such ease. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this wasn't just a fleeting affair. The word daddy implied a rooted presence, a life that had grown quietly, deeply in the soil of his deception. That was the night I stopped being the trusting, blind wife and started becoming a detective. I started looking for the second life he was living, the one that celebrated birthdays on my birthday, the one that had a family I knew nothing about. The drive home after hearing that word, Daddy, was the longest, most agonizing 2 hours of my life. I didn't just cry. I felt like I was physically dissolving. Every shared memory, every anniversary, every bedtime kiss, it all felt infected. Mark arrived home Saturday morning, exactly when he said he would, smelling faintly of concrete dust and something else, something flowery and unfamiliar. He was tired, apologetic, and sickeningly charming. "God, I'm so sorry about your birthday, babe." It was hell. "We barely averted a total site collapse," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt suddenly restrictive, like a cage. I hugged him back, forcing a smile onto my face. I had to act. The old me, the trusting wife, had to remain visible while the new me, the investigator, worked silently underneath. I looked into his eyes, searching for a flicker of guilt, a slip in his composure. Nothing. He was an expert liar, or maybe the man I thought I knew was just a brilliant performance. For the next few weeks, I lived a double existence. By day, I was Mark's loving, supportive wife. I packed his lunch, wished him safe travels, and kept up our nightly routine of predictable calls. By night, I was on a mission. The first thing I did was try the apartment code again. It still worked. That confirmed he hadn't changed anything, perhaps because he never thought I'd use it, or maybe because he simply didn't care enough to cover his tracks thoroughly. I started with the electronics. Our pact of no secrets meant we knew each other's passwords, but I hadn't actually needed them in years. I accessed his secondary work email, the one he only used for the big project. It was clean. No suspicious correspondence, just typical architectural jargon. But then I found something odd in his drafts folder. A flight confirmation for a trip 6 months ago. not to the project city, but to Orlando, Florida. He had told me he was flying to a supplier convention in Chicago that week. Orlando, Disney World, the place you take children. That one flight confirmation was all I needed to confirm my horrifying suspicion. This wasn't a one-night stand. This wasn't a mistress. This was a parallel life. I went deeper. I knew Mark kept a detailed expense log on a cloud drive for tax purposes. It was tedious work, cross-referencing credit card charges with his supposed location. I discovered a pattern. Every month, a recurring charge from a small local florist in the project city. Not the huge corporate one he'd used to send flowers to my office, but a small independent shop called Lily's Petals. Then a consistent monthly payment to a preschool. Not a huge sum, but enough for tuition. He was meticulous, though. He used a prepaid debit card for all these second life expenses. But he wasn't meticulous enough. Once when he was showering, I quickly checked the GPS history on his old work truck's navigation system. He usually cleared it, but this time he'd missed a crucial day. The last destination on the day of my birthday was not the apartment complex I visited, but a different address in a quiet, tree-lined suburb about 20 minutes away. I wrote the address down on the back of an old receipt, feeling the pen tremble in my hand. This wasn't the rental. This had to be the home. The following Tuesday, Mark left early for his 4-day trip. I took a sick day, my stomach churning with anxiety. I drove to the suburb. It was a beautiful neighborhood, the kind with immaculate lawns and kids' toys scattered in the driveways. I found the address. It was a charming 2-story house with blue siding and white trim. There was a little red wagon by the front door and a wind chime that played a delicate tune. And there, affixed proudly above the mailbox, was a small, personalized wooden sign that read, "The Miller Family." Mark's last name was Miller. I parked down the street, my hands clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. I didn't have to wait long. A minivan pulled up to the house. Out stepped a woman. She was beautiful, in a simple, effortless way. She had warm, honey-colored hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired but happy, the kind of happy that comes from domestic stability. And she wasn't alone. From the passenger side tumbled a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with Mark's unmistakable, slightly crooked smile. Her hair was the exact shade of Mark's brown. She was carrying a school backpack, running up to the door and yelling in that clear, melodic voice that had shattered my birthday. "Mommy, I'm home!" I slumped against the window, tears finally streaming down my face. Daddy was not a mistake. This wasn't a mistress. This was his other wife, his other child. The reality was so much larger, so much crueler than I could have imagined. Mark hadn't just had an affair. He had built an entire functional, loving family unit. A unit that was almost certainly the source of his exhausting work trips and plumbing emergencies. But the truly shocking revelation, the thing that chilled me to my core, was yet to come. I stayed parked for an hour, watching the rhythm of their life. I saw Mark's minivan, the one he claimed was just for work, the one with his corporate logo barely visible on the side, parked in their driveway. Just as I was about to leave, defeated and hollowed out, the woman, the other wife, stepped out onto the porch, carrying a small package. She walked over to the minivan and opened the door. On the driver's seat, she placed a neatly folded piece of mail. As she walked back, she casually glanced down the street. Our eyes met. She didn't look shocked or surprised to see a strange woman parked in her neighborhood. She looked knowing. She gave me the faintest, most unsettlingly serene smile, a tiny, almost sympathetic nod, and then disappeared back inside her house. It hit me like a physical blow. She knew who I was. Mark hadn't just deceived me. He had somehow woven a lie so complex that his second family was aware of my existence. The first wife, the one back home. And they seemed to be perfectly okay with it. The serene, knowing smile of the woman in the blue house haunted my sleep for the next 3 nights. It wasn't the look of a mistress who was oblivious to the man's real life, nor the look of a victim being duped. It was the look of a co-conspirator, a person who was fully aware of the complicated, twisted structure of Mark's life, and most disturbingly, had accepted her role in it. I finally had a name for her. I spent hours sifting through local public records, checking property deeds, cross-referencing names associated with the Miller family address. Her name was Sarah Miller. Mark had purchased that house outright 5 years ago, 3 years into our marriage, listing her as his common-law spouse, and later, the mother of their child, Lily, the name of the florist, the name of their daughter. Everything was connected, everything was planned, and everything was a lie constructed around me. The shock gave way to a cold, burning clarity. I wasn't dealing with a simple cheating husband. I was dealing with a man who had built a fraudulent empire, and 2 families were living on opposite sides of his kingdom. I needed evidence, irrefutable proof that would stand up not just in divorce court, but in the court of public opinion, should it come to that. I went back to his expense logs. The prepaid card was clever, but the man had an ego. He often booked flights and hotels for himself, using his corporate points, then filed the minor cash expenses separately. I downloaded everything: receipts for the preschool, utility bills for Sarah's house, and most damningly, a series of expensive jewelry purchases from a local jeweler in the project city, dated every year around Valentine's Day and her birthday. They were always marked as client appreciation gifts in his files. The biggest breakthrough came when I examined his phone bill. I usually ignored it, but I now saw a recurring number that appeared dozens of times a week, always during the hours he claimed to be working late or stuck in traffic. I dialed the number. A woman's voice answered, "Lily's Petals. How can I help you?" I hung up, feeling sick. He wasn't just calling a florist. He was calling Sarah at her place of employment, which must have been a small shop she owned or worked at. It maintained the illusion of an innocent business call. It was a communication channel hidden in plain sight. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Mark wasn't just hiding his affair. He was integrating his second family into the fabric of his professional life. But Sarah's smile was still the thing that unnerved me most. Why would a woman accept being the second wife in this toxic arrangement, especially when a child was involved? The only answer I could come up with was this: Mark must have convinced her that I was the problem. Maybe he told her I was terminally ill or mentally unstable, or perhaps that we had an open marriage that had gone sour, anything to justify his continued deception. I decided to use the one thing Mark relied on: his routine. He was coming home the following Friday. I needed to confront him when he was physically tired, mentally off guard, and when the evidence was freshest in my mind. I spent the next 3 days making preparations. I hired a divorce attorney, a sharp, discreet woman named Ms. Davies, who advised me to secure all joint accounts, change my passwords, and prepare an exit strategy. The house was in both our names, but I needed to protect my financial future from the sinkhole he'd created. Thursday night, the night before he was due back, I couldn't sleep. I found myself pacing the living room, looking at the wedding photos on the mantel. They mocked me. I suddenly remembered a brief conversation from years ago. Mark's family. Mark's parents had always been coolly polite to me, never truly warm. They lived far away and only visited once a year. They knew about the project and his frequent trips. I suddenly wondered, did his parents know about Sarah and Lily? My blood ran cold again. It was too late to call them, but the mere thought of a larger family conspiracy, a conspiracy that might span Mark's entire original family, made my hands shake. If his parents were covering for him, the betrayal wasn't just his, it was systemic. I composed a short, non-committal text message to Mark, knowing he'd read it when he woke up in Sarah's bed. "Hey, can you come straight home Friday? I have some fantastic news I need to share with you immediately. Can't wait." Fantastic news was my psychological trap. It would put him on the defensive, make him believe I was about to announce something huge, maybe a promotion, or maybe the impossible, that I was pregnant. It would force him to rush home, distracted, and without time to craft his next layer of lies. Friday afternoon, the minivan, the one with the corporate logo and the little red wagon scent, pulled into our driveway. Mark looked exhausted, but his eyes were wide with curiosity and a touch of nervousness. He walked through the door and dropped his travel bag by the entrance. He looked at me, scanning my face for clues. "Hey, babe." I rushed. I took the day off. "What's the great news? You sound totally pumped." He tried to kiss me, but I gently turned my head so his kiss landed on my cheek. "It's amazing news, Mark," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's so amazing that I think we need to celebrate it with the whole family." Both of them. He froze. His smile evaporated, replaced by a deep, terrifying shadow of panic. His face went instantly pale. He knew. "What? What are you talking about, honey?" he stammered, his eyes darting towards the door, looking for a non-existent escape route. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply reached over to the table and picked up a large, glossy photo I'd secretly had developed. A picture of Sarah, Lily, and Mark, standing on the steps of the blue house, holding a "Welcome Home, Daddy" banner. "I'm talking about Lily," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet it felt louder than any shout. "I'm talking about Sarah. And I'm talking about the fact that she knows exactly who I am." Mark stared at the photo in my hand, his face a grotesque mask of betrayal and realization. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. The panic that had flashed in his eyes moments before hardened into a cold, empty resignation. Where did you get that?" His voice was a raw, rasping whisper. He didn't deny it. The lie, 10 years in the making, had collapsed on itself. "Does it matter, Mark?" I tossed the photo onto the coffee table, letting the smiling faces mock us both. "The real question is, how did you think you could sustain this? A whole second life? A daughter? Another wife? Did you think I was so stupid, so disconnected that I would never notice the gaping holes in your story?" He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. The silence stretched between us, thick and toxic. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but still strangely devoid of the remorse I craved. There was only self-pity. "I didn't plan it, Anna." "Not initially." He started. The classic cheating husband cliché. "The project, it was intense. I was lonely. Sarah was easy. She didn't have the same high-pressure career demands you did. She was home. She was comfortable. His words hit me like stones. I wasn't busy, I was demanding. I wasn't successful, I was inconvenient. And Lily? I cut him off, my voice shaking with raw fury. Was she easy too? You built a child out of your loneliness, Mark? She's a human being, not a comfort blanket. He winced. Lily was an accident, a beautiful accident. When Sarah got pregnant, I tried to end things. I swear I did. But she threatened to expose everything. She said she wouldn't let her child grow up without a father. Ah, the threat, I scoffed. The classic blackmail. But that doesn't explain how she knew about me. That doesn't explain the smile I got when I parked outside your house, your Miller family home. She knew I was the first wife, Mark. How did she know? Mark shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man cornered. Because I told her, he finally admitted, the words barely audible. I told her everything. But not how you think. He took a deep breath, and what followed was the most shocking, venomous lie I had ever heard, a true testament to his capacity for cruelty. When I met Sarah, she wanted commitment. I had to create a reason for why I couldn't be with her full time. I told her you were very sick, that you had a rare progressive disease that was slowly incapacitating you, and that I was staying with you out of obligation, out of pity, because I couldn't abandon you on your deathbed. I stood there, processing the hideousness of his confession, my sickness, my deathbed. He hadn't just cheated. He had fabricated my entire tragic demise to justify his freedom to his second family. I told her you were frail, unstable, that you needed round-the-clock care, which is why I couldn't bring her or Lily here, that my work trips were actually trips to her, Sarah, my only solace, my only escape from the tragedy of our marriage. I made you the martyr, the demanding invalid, the reason I had to live two separate lives. The betrayal was no longer just about sex or money. It was about the complete dismantling of my identity, using my fictional illness as the cornerstone of his second life's foundation. And she believed you, I asked, the words hollow. She agreed to raise your child knowing that the real wife was wasting away in a house 2 hours away? She was sympathetic, Mark pleaded. She saw me as the tragic hero, the dutiful husband making an impossible choice. She always told me I was too good for you, given your circumstances. She knew about you, Anna, but she knew the version of you I invented for her, a version she could easily pity and condescend to. It was a conspiracy of silence built on a monstrous lie about my suffering. Sarah wasn't an innocent victim. She was a participant who accepted a man who was already married because she believed she was the morally superior option, the one providing him the happiness his dying wife couldn't. Suddenly, the serene smile I'd received from her made sickening sense. It was the smile of the woman who thought she was winning, the woman who believed the first wife was already on her way out. So when she saw me, Mark, I whispered, holding up the photo again, when she saw the healthy, not dying wife standing outside her house, she wasn't surprised. She was just seeing the reality that shattered your whole narrative. She probably thought you were investigating me because you were having a psychotic break, Mark muttered miserably. This was the final straw. He still, even at this moment, was trying to defend the narrative he'd fed Sarah. He was trying to protect his lie even while confessing it. I finally pulled out my trump card. I didn't need to argue with him anymore. I needed to act. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick legal packet. "This is not a conversation, Mark," I said, dropping the divorce papers, which landed with a loud, definitive slap on the coffee table right next to the photograph. "This is a termination notice. Your second family knew about me. Yes, but they knew the ghost I was supposed to be. Now they'll know the reality." I paused, looking him directly in his hollow eyes. "And the amazing news I rushed you home for? It's that you're going to pay child support to Sarah and alimony to me. We filed yesterday. I've secured the joint accounts. You are officially locked out of the finances you used to pay for both of your lives. The double life is over, Mark. Welcome to reality." Mark's reaction was one of complete collapse. The reality of the divorce papers and the locked bank accounts was the demolition order for the fake world he had built over the years. The panic on his face was no longer just that of a caught husband, but of a businessman losing financial control for the first time in his life. "You can't do this, Anna. My career will be ruined. If the company finds out," he pleaded, his voice no longer containing anger but desperation. "Your career was built on my imaginary death, Mark," I replied, all warmth frozen within me. "Your priorities were your career and your lies. My priority is now just my truth." That night, Mark stayed in the guest room, not our bedroom. The next morning, he took his suitcase and left. He didn't say where he was going, but most likely he had gone to the blue house, to Sarah, where his lie had taken root. It was time for her to learn the truth as well. The confrontation with Sarah Miller was the most complex character in the story. She was a woman who had accepted the role of the tragic husband's noble lover, as told by Mark. My lawyer, Miss Davies, handled the situation in the least dramatic yet most effective way. She sent Sarah documentation, including statements of Mark's heavy transfers from joint accounts, our marriage certificate, and the expense reports Mark had filed as my treatment costs. All of this proved that the story of the terminally ill wife was a complete fabrication. I expected anger and denial from Sarah. What came instead was a shocking email. The subject line simply read, "Anna. Dear Anna, I am struggling to grasp the magnitude of the lie Mark constructed for me. He always told me how challenging your condition was, his duty to you, and why we couldn't be a full-time family. I never questioned you, because he was so convincing. I believed you were a victim, yes, but I believed your circumstances made me his only real happiness. Last night, he returned to Lily's Petals and confessed everything, but even his confessions were laced with lies. These documents explain everything. I am a victim too, Anna. He used us both as instruments of his ambition. I do not hate you. On the contrary, I commend you for exposing this monster. I am ashamed that I allowed my daughter to grow up within this lie. Please know that I will be on your side in my own legal battle. I will take on the responsibility of caring for my daughter alone, but I will help you expose all the mechanisms Mark used to finance these two lives." Sarah's response once again proved what a snake Mark was. While Sarah thought Anna was the primary victim, she herself had been living inside an equally large lie. The family conspiracy. The last lingering question was Mark's family. The detailed phone records were with my lawyer, and a call with Mark's father occurred just before Mark would leave for the Blue House, supposedly to discuss the project. A simple move by Miss Davies revealed the truth. A formal notice detailing evidence related to their granddaughter, Lily, along with Mark's legal obligations, was sent to Mark's parents. The reply was an enraged phone call from Mark's mother. "Mark was forced to settle because of your illness, Anna. He is our son. We had to give him happiness. That house was an escape for him. Now, by exposing this, you're not just ruining him, you're ruining our granddaughter." It was at that moment the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They knew. The family had bought into the lie that Mark was miserable because of his sick wife. They had encouraged him to secretly seek his happiness while fulfilling his duty to his ill wife. The betrayal was not an individual act. It was a systemic, family-sanctioned decision. "Do me a favor," I said calmly. "Keep lying to your son, whatever the cost, but do not attempt to interfere with the legal process. If you think your son deserves this, then support him. But leave me alone." The legal process was ugly, exhausting, and drawn out. Mark initially tried to resist, but thanks to Sarah's cooperation and Mark's own obsessive habit of keeping all his accounting records, his lies were proven one by one. His company found out about the lawsuit, and the ethical violation led to his resignation. The divorce became final 6 months later. I received full ownership of the house and a substantial portion of Mark's share of the joint assets as compensation for emotional damages. He was left as a man on the brink of bankruptcy, forced to meet his legal obligations to both Sarah and Lily. Eventually, I drove past the blue house one last time. There was no corporate minivan parked there anymore, just a small red car and a little girl playing in the yard. Sarah looked up and saw me through the window. In her eyes, there was no longer that cold, knowing smirk, nor was there pity. There was just deep exhaustion and disappointment. I gave a slight nod, a kind of silent acknowledgement from one woman to another. When I got home, the only key in my hand belonged to the rest of my life. That night, I stood in front of the fireplace and burned all the wedding photos, all the cards Mark had ever written me. As the paper caught fire, the smoke of a 10-year lie stung my eyes, and finally, I cried. These were tears not of sadness, but of liberation and a silent promise never to be a victim of someone else's script again. A few months later, I sold the house and moved to a smaller, brighter place to start a completely new life, my own life. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.